Hi, I'm Captain Larry Bell with Texas Fishing Tips, and this is your weekly fishing report.
Over here on the San Antonio shoreline, all the way down here in Cottonwood, all the way down to Panther Point, Panther Lake, Swan Lake, all back in this area here, all the way down to Twin and Cedar. We've had all different types of weather things that's gone on the past week or two. We've had fog, we've had lower tide, we've had higher tide, high winds, fronts that's come in, cold, not so cold. We've just had a little bit of everything coming in the last 10 days. We're cycling toward that full moon right now. So one thing that you're going to want to do is downsize your baits. Get a little bit smaller profile bait there to start your day with. Then you can progress from there as you see fit. If you start to see a pattern develop with fish wanting something a little bit bigger profile, whether it be down south regular model, down south burner, down south supermodel, or possibly Little John or Provoker or something to that effect. If you see anything like the Marker 54 jerk shrimp or the mullet run, either one of those are all different little profile baits, but they're all effective baits at the same time. When you got the tides that drop out of here, one thing to take in consideration too, now San Antonio Bay here is just super wide open to the northeast. So all this area here is really affected if you have a big front that pushes down in here. So this is one of these areas that you're really not wanting to be caught into. So you have to make sure that you pay attention to what the fronts are doing, what weather is doing, what your tide is doing. So if you've got a lower tide, go hit all these mouths that go into these back lakes. There's nice little guts and cuts that go into those. You can weight them very easily. Some of them are a little softer than others, but there's been nice trout that's kind of hanging into some of these. A few flounder have been caught and pulled out of these as well. You'll have some redfish that dwell in some of these mouths up and down this shoreline here. But that's been on those kind of days where it's been kind of mild, where the wind hadn't been super bad. Shifting back around to south, southwest, southeast in this area is nice and protected. But when you get those northeast winds, this area up here becomes kind of sketchy. So you really want to make sure that you pay attention to that. Get back in here in Panther Lake. Panther Lake's got nice protection all the way around it. You got nice opportunities against shorelines. One of the shorelines in will present itself that you can fish it depending on what type of wind you got. There have been nice fish, box fish, trout been caught out of here, been redfish that's been pulled out of here, an occasional black drum. Not that's necessarily what I'm targeting, but have caught one or two out of here as well. Again, flounder, been pulled out of this area recently. So all this in here comes into play, and it's all been based on what our tides are doing. If you've got to be up in this area or you can get to this area and you got a super foggy day, man, just make sure you take it with ease and caution because it's not worth it. Say something close to your area that you're launching from and find some areas in that wherever you're coming from, and just make sure that your safety is first and foremost on days like that. But otherwise, if you got nice full vision that you can see these trout, redfish up and down the shoreline, Cedar Lake has had some opportunities with some topwater bait in here. Redfish have reacted to that. Double D as well. Again, the down south, all three versions of that, super, the regular, and the burners have been good in just about any color. If that water's dirty, go with your darker baits in there, like probably a color X has been good. The white bone diamond, white ice has been good in that kind of stuff. And if you've got a little bit more clear water, go with a supernatural or like the Little John, the golden red glitter is one of my favorites to throw into that type of water. These areas here will lend yourself to find you locating some fish. Locate bait. Remember, this time of year, we don't have as much bait in the area, in the system. So any little bit of bait that you see flipping is going to be considered a lot of bait. So, and then again, the artificial game this time of year becomes first and foremost. You can be very successful and very productive with throwing artificial baits, especially up in these areas. St. Charles Bay. Get over here, go straight across from the St. Charles boat ramp there. Shoot straight across to this shoreline over here, and you can stay protected on that depending on what kind of winds that we got. Like if we got a big north wind that's blowing in here, obviously you want to stay on the westerly side of St. Charles Bay so you can run a little bit more protected. But if you got the south-southeast breeze, maybe even east breeze, you're pretty good over here. But that said, big flat that's over here across from that, you can wade all this area here. You can stay, 100, 200 yards out away from the bank depending on what your tide levels are, and it's important that you pay attention to that because St. Charles Bay, when you're throwing artificial baits, becomes tide important. So depending on if you have a higher tide or a lower tide, all these areas that are up in here and down the shoreline, all the way up to Egg Point, all the way around to Boy Scout Camp, even toward the back and over Cavasso, any of those areas, that you want to be able to fish, they're all weather and tide predicated as far as if those are not good areas to fish or good areas to fish. So what you want to be able to do is work your down souths in here, all the models above, super, regular, burner shads, work your provokers, work your double Ds, work your top waters, work all those particular baits in here. Look for your bait. Look for your areas that are showing just a little bit of bait. One thing I have noticed is these tides have dropped out and we've gotten lower tides. The bait fish are starting to push up on these grass flats because they're protected up on that. The water gets warmer faster during their day because shallow water heats up and cools off faster. So you're seeing a lot of bait that are around those grass edges on top of those grass flats. So if you're able to wade to those areas or get around those particular areas, and you'll see a little bit of protection there from the wind. You'll see bait that's stacked up on top of those areas. So wade down the edges of that. So those fish, whether it be redfish, whether it be flounder, trout, they're going to be hanging off the edges of those grass flats like that. So there's going to be lots of bait that's going to be popping up there. It's going to be showing all that type of stuff. And then as you work those edges, then those fish will start to present themselves to you. So pay attention. Again, we're trending toward a full moon. We're real close to it. So you've got these days that go up to that, and the 3, 4, 5 days that are after a full moon that you're going to have the opportunities to do that. Remember, your early morning and late evenings are going to be your best opportunities during that time frame. That minor that'll be kicking in is going to be early morning, late evening when that moon is setting and rising. So that's when it's going to be your best opportunities to find and get that bite to happen. So pay attention to the profile size of your bait and what you're throwing, whether it's soft bait, hard bait, suspended bait, any of the above. So make sure you pay attention to what's going on. Those fish will present themselves to you as long as you're getting in these areas where you got a little bit of bait working, so you can work the edges of this and you'll find your fish. Long Reef Bend area, all this down here, all these little back lake mouths that pop out into Long Reef Bend all the way up to Jaybird Point, all these areas here. Now again, with all different types of weather anomalies that we've been having, we've had fronts, we've had fog, we've had lower tides, we've had higher tides, we've had washout tides, we've had a little negative tides, we've had water everywhere, not so much water. So it's kind of all over the place. So it's important for you to pay attention to what your tide is doing, mainly this time of year what your weather is doing, because it's really volatile. We have 30 and 40 mile an hour winds one day and have 5 to 10 mile an hour winds the next day, and sunshine and cloud and rain and everything. So pay attention to all that stuff. Make sure you're prepared for this time of year, because you can put yourself in jeopardy if you're not prepared for all the different types of weather situations that we have, because this stuff can come up on you extremely fast. So that said, all this area up in here in the Long Reef Bend area, work the guts, the mouths again, just like I talked about earlier in the San Antonio Bay area. Work these back lake mouths. In here you've got guts and cuts that come into these areas. You got a little bit deeper water here that when the water does drop, that these fish want to drop off these flats and they want to get in those mouths and they want to get in those guts, and they'll travel in and out of those things. If you don't find fish in one of them, move to the next one. Move out a little bit deeper. If you've got your corkies, whether it be the originals, the sinkers, the floaters, and the Paul Browns and the Fat Boys, work all that stuff out away from the shoreline. Get about 150, 200, maybe 300 yards out to whatever you're comfortable fishing. You'll find those fish possibly out here on the deeper edge. If you've got a little bit of work or bait working out in those areas, those prime location, especially this time of year, throw those floaters, throw those suspended bait, the Paul Browns, double D's, to where you can work it in that waist deep to knee deep water. Throw your plastics, whether it be the down south, whether it be a mirror lure, whether it be a marker 54, any of the above is good this time of year. Pay attention to what your water clarity is, and that would kind of dictate to you what color baits that you want to throw, whether it be darker or lighter color baits. The one thing that's been really good up in here is the floaters. For me personally, I've been throwing a lot of the Paul Brown floaters, the original floater. Looks like a little torpedo. It's been a really terrific bait. It's just a little bit smaller than what the Fat Boys are, but it's a little bit elongated. It looks really a lot like a finger mullet, especially I like to throw the black and silver one. So it's really effective in that type of water. You can get that thing up shallow. We've been finding fish up in knee-deep water. We've been finding them in waist-deep water, all up and down the shoreline here. But the one thing that has been consistent, there has been just enough bait to hold those fish in there. Water temperature has been in the mid-60s to low 60s. Been depending on what kind of fronts and weather that we've had to push in there, because it acclimates off of that. But look for these areas here. Work those mouths. There's been some nice trout that's been pulled out of there. There's been some scattered redfish out of there, an occasional flounder in here, all up and down the shoreline, all the way down towards Spalding if you want to work that far down. But I've been primarily working the Long Reef Bend area. Duck season is still going. Still got to hang in there with that and watch out for that. So if you see some duck blinds out there, it's got some decoys on it, just be aware. You may want to have your contingency plan in place, 2, 3, 4 more areas that you can get to that you don't have to worry about that too much. But that said, you should be able to work all this shoreline up and down here. You should be able to locate your fish. Again, majors and minors this time of year, really important. Artificial game is extremely important this time of year because those fish are looking for something to eat. There's not as much bait in the system. So the artificial game becomes extremely important, and you can be very productive with it.
Thanks for watching. I'm Captain Larry Bell.